I want to invite you to the Entrepreneurial Hierarchy of Needs online community. Inside this community, we can take the Ehan Assessment, and that's what all of this is based on. It's a self-assessment that we should be doing about every 12 weeks to evaluate how satisfied we are in our health, our wealth, our relationships, recreation, and our business. The goal is to live a satisfied life. So go ahead, join the community, do the assessment, and go ahead and sign up for that blind spot call. That'll get us one-on-one talking about your assessment so you can get a better perspective and so you can set the best goals possible. All right, all the links are in the show notes. Enjoy the show.
And it's so tough because I know we're all geared, and that's how we keep score as entrepreneurs. And so when you see that something's not sustainable, your goal is to how quickly can I fix it and how quickly can I get back to where I was.
Yeah.
And so, or where I felt like I should have been. And a lot of that is all up here with how we look at it all in our own head of what we feel like we should have been at. But and that's why I'm so passionate about getting this message out, is because this is a easy way to where if you will follow the wealth pyramid, you will be able to have dependable, predictable cash flow. It protects you in so many different situations, and it gives you the ability to do what you want to do, which is take advantage of opportunity.
In my opinion, Samuel Prentice is a wealth wizard. His entire goal when working with clients is to simplify their wealth management process to improve their quality of life. I can't believe how well he simplifies the topic of wealth creation in this episode, and I don't think I'll ever look at the way I build my own wealth the same. I hope you enjoy this episode with Samuel Prentice from My Wealth CEO. My name is Tim Palladino, and this is the Entrepreneurial Hierarchy of Needs podcast. All right, Samuel Prentice, thank you so much for being here. We've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. Yeah. No, it's good to reconnect, and it's kind of funny here. I think this is the first time we've talked in maybe a year and a half or so. But I've followed you, and I've gotten to just recently. I cracked off the shrink wrap on the side hustle game because I've been a fan of that from day one, from whatever the first name was to where it's at now. I've been looking forward to playing it.
Yep, and we have actually a new version coming out. We're doing we're doing a whole footprint issue, like where we're reducing the size of it, reducing the waste. Yeah, so we're trying to take care of Mama Earth and make it a much more fun game. Yeah. So I appreciate your support, man, from the top.
Yeah. Well, this is, man, I'm so excited to be on this podcast because we just mentioned just a minute ago here. I am such a believer in what you're doing here. Like, this is something I've been having these conversations for the last 3 years with my clients across the board, because there's so much more to life than just like I work specifically on the money side, but there's so much more to it that I think that when we neglect that, we miss out on lots of the development, lots of just the opportunity to be the best version of yourself. And that's something that, man, your mission, couldn't respect it more and couldn't be more supportive of it. Super excited for what you're doing.
Yeah. And I appreciate that to the fullest, just hearing that, I don't hear it much, but when I do hear it, like it kind of shakes me, man. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, it hits me in the heart, and that's cool.
It should. You're doing work here that, man, not many people are doing. And it's something that it is difficult in the entrepreneurial world. We all want to have all the answers. We want to have it all right put together. And so someone who's willing to be real and have like these visceral conversations that kind of challenge beliefs or that provide new insights, man, that's not an easy job. And it's something that, man, it can make a huge impact. And I think that's a very cool opportunity, but also something you should take seriously. And I respect you to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try and be the guinea pig, not the guru. Like, these are where I don't understand things. So I'm just going to get professionals to help me understand things, and hopefully we understand them together. And then paired with the assessment, like, they'll know how severe it is if they have to worry about their health or their wealth, or, say they fall somewhere short on their wealth. They'll know this is an important episode to listen to get me, started or accelerate what I've already started to kind of like blossom my understandings. Yeah. So dude, I'm so happy you're here. Couldn't be happier. Let's try and make some people multiply their money.
Let's do it. Yeah. So I'm going to do this because if you have questions that you want to try to ask, you think would help your audience,
sure.
That's the case. I'm going to set a little bit of context and then kind of lay out content after that. Beautiful. To kind of give a clean, easy framework for you to flow through. But I have nothing, like I have no agenda. I never have any agenda, Tim, and that's a problem. So I like to share what I think would help people in general, and
Rock and
then
roll.
that's the information there. And so yeah, so we'll go through it. So the context behind this is I've been doing this for like a decade, almost, I guess, closer to a decade and a half now. And so I have gotten to go the whole gamut of like young 20-year-old Sam was gung ho. He's like, oh, we're going to get all this stuff done. We're going to get all this research. And I'm going to not only research everything, I'm going to make sure that everybody I work with gets to see all this brilliant research so they know all the ins and outs and
Hmm.
can make perfect decisions. Because the goal is not to tell people what to do, but it's to empower people to make good decisions with their money.
Absolutely.
And I like that. And I still, 20-year-old Sam had some of those things right. The challenge is nobody has the capacity, whether it's time, mental margin, or resources, to go and dig through all of that same stuff, the same level that I would want to. And so
Yeah.
finding a way to actually like simplify building wealth down to like practical, meaningful steps is something I've spent the last 3 years on, because I actually went through a similar thing that I know that every entrepreneur has gone through, of that either burnout or real close to burnout, where
Yeah.
I got to a point where it wasn't a money problem. So money was there, but it was
Hmm.
an impact problem. Because I think that's kind of the journey we all go through, as we go
Yeah.
from making enough money to survive, making enough money to live life the way you really want to live life. And then it's like, well, shoot, I actually want to do something. So now it's about impact. And you kind of make that transition over time as we go up that hierarchy of needs and our
Hmm.
money. And like, so I was sitting there looking at all the clients I'd talk to. We'd have great conversations. We'd connect. We'd have good conversations. I would be like, man, I left them with a lot of good information. Who would talk a year later, and very little would have gotten done. And we'd ask why. And I was like, well, we started, and then this came up, or this came up, or my attorney
Yeah.
didn't understand what we were talking about. My CPA didn't understand. Nobody coordinated together. And this poor entrepreneur in the middle, who's trying to deal with all the other things that pull away from their mental margin to other
Yeah.
areas, is trying to coordinate all of it together. And so I had enough of those conversations that I just kind of got a frustration point. Said, well, this is just not right. So I kind of took a step back, really weighing down my acquisition of clients, with intentionality to that, of saying I really want to acquire fewer clients and make sure the ones I am acquiring, I'm dealing with and leaving an impact to. And what I learned is that by simplifying the wealth planning thing down to like the structural mechanics of wealth, it makes it a lot easier, because then that simplified process can apply to all types of wealth building, whether it's your personal balance sheet, your
Mm.
business, your trust, your charitable entities. All those things kind of follow the same model. So I'm going to share that with you, and I don't think I have yet to share this on a podcast.
Well, all
And
right.
it's one, because I like you a lot. I genuinely actually really find your post quite entertaining. So that's
I
actually
appreciate
true.
that.
And then two, additionally true, is just that I just haven't really been in a mode to do that, because one of the things about podcasts is I, in the past, I did podcasts for the purpose of lead acquisition, and so I probably have a
Mm.
slight mental block. Is I am happy to help anyone. I had a call the other day with somebody, and when I was done, I said, listen, in this hour-long call, I'm going to tell you everything you do with your life, and we're going to leave it at that. And then you don't really need anything else from me, because it's not the right time to work anymore. So one of the things I love about podcast is the ability to like share a lot of information to a big group of people, make a big impact. But that's where I can like kind of bring value and then leave it, and then not feel, and there's not a whole lot of follow up past that pulls away from
Hmm.
the mental. So
Yeah.
this is exciting for me, because it's kind of fulfilling one of my goals, is when I have people that maybe aren't quite right for private advice, where they don't want to spend, X amount of dollars a month to have someone telling them what to do with their finances, but they want to go dig it up themselves. This content lives in a place that they can do that. And
Yeah.
I think you're giving me a great opportunity too, because it gets something off of my plate where I can share. If I were trying to tell someone how to build the basic building blocks of how to build wealth, and not just when you have nothing and are starting from scratch, but also this is the same talk I have with my clients who've exited for 10, 15, $20 million, is they all have the same fears as the person who has $10,000 to the name. And that fear is that,
Yeah.
what if what I have is not sustainable? And I think that as entrepreneurs, we are so wired for sustainability in that
Hmm.
whole hierarchy of the needs. And I feel so comfortable talking to you about this, because I think you've been down this journey so much. It's
Oh
like
God, yeah.
that whole sustainability, because you want sustainability with your health. You realize if you don't keep a routine with your health, your exercise and diet, sleep patterns, all those things, that routine doesn't happen, it's not sustainable. And
Mm.
our entrepreneurial brains, the way that we are wired, hear that and it's like red flag, red flag, red
Yeah, it's
flag.
scary.
And that triggers you into stress, which does not make you eat healthier, exercise more, or sleep better.
Yep. Right. Then you
And
start.
same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like, we work so hard on our business. Like, that's what brought me to this point, is I worked so hard on my business, everything started suffering. So I started focusing on everything else. Then my business started suffering. And it's hold on. I'm a problem-solving machine. Like, why can't I have all of it? Like, and it just took me years and maybe a breakdown or two to really like put pen to paper and be like, all right, this is my path. So it was kind of like creating a business plan for my life.
It is. And that's what I liked about it, is you found a way to simplify it down where you say, okay, if I want to have a sustainable life in all of these areas, here's kind of the framework. And it is, if nothing else, it is a plan. And you try to simplify it as much as possible, because our brains, as many problems we can solve, we just can't deal with them all at once. You've got to triage and have a way, like have a process for it. So I found that to be really, really true with wealth, is because in our brains and entrepreneur brains, there's this trigger that happens, is like when you get to a point where you say, hey, I have hit sustainable cash flow that lets me live life on the terms that I want to live it on. Your brain goes ding, 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 ding. You've done it. And that, like, seeing people get to that knowledge, and sometimes it's not even a big change. It's just like understanding how the money works and having a system. Boom, it opens that up. And then once that ding, ding, ding has happened, that person is ready to go make their impact on the world. And it's pretty cool what it does.
Yeah. And that's quite literally the position that I took once I sold my company. I lost purpose for a little bit, but I had that ding moment where I was like, oh, everything's different now. Yeah. It's not about the dollars in the bank. Like I've checked that off. It's about, what am I doing with my life? Like, as you start asking the true existential questions on, where's my journey going? Like, where am I pointing to? Because if you don't point, someone else will, and you go that direction. Absolutely. So hyper intentionality is super important, and it's a big responsibility.
Yep.
For you and your community,
100%. To whom much is given, much is required. I think that is true regardless of your affiliation.
Yeah.
But so I didn't think that up. I'm pretty sure someone else thought that up.
Oh, you totally just could have coined him.
So that being said, okay, so I'm going to drop some stuff here, because I think this is on my mind, and this is something that I've seen be really, really impactful. And so I've kind of designed this talk around, it's called the wealth pyramid. And it's because it is a structurally stable way to build wealth. So at the base of this pyramid, we want to have liquidity. The reason you have liquidity at the base is because liquidity is, again, from a financial aspect, is what lets you mitigate risk when challenges happen higher up, whether it's interruption of income, interruption of cash maintenance requirements, whatever it is, and the above assets that are above liquidity. Liquidity helps you fix problems, mitigate risk. It's important psychologically, because I think that any entrepreneur who says they can look at their bank account and see zero and be okay is lying to you. You need cushion to be comfortable. It just is what it is. And I think that we operate better from that position. After that, so after liquidity, the next thing we're trying to do is create cash flow. So that's the next tier up in the puzzle. And so cash flow are things that provide us with consistent income, from diversified portfolios, whether that's diversified businesses or dividend paying stocks, or real estate is one of the typical things that I like to use. Debt, secure debt from, good paper that we can create cash flow payments off of. That lets us generate cash flow to replace the income that we're earning from other active activities. The reason this is really important, and I'm going to stop before I get to the last part, because everybody wants to do the last part first. It's speculation, but we'll get there in a second. but the reason, the first two levels are most important is because as we widen our cash flow, let's just take real estate, for example. That's something everybody can kind of understand and see how this works. When you go buy $1 million of real estate, you create cash flow, which is good, but you also create the potential for tenants to move out, and you have, vacancy. You also create some maintenance concerns, those kind of things, all of which over a long period in time are no big deal, as long as you bought right and keep the right amount of reserve and liquidity in place. The issue where people come into play, or the issue comes into play where people lose money, is when you don't have enough liquidity to bolster yourself in the event of a cash flow interruption and a potential liability that happens with rent property. Well, now you have to sell that cash flowing asset potentially for a discount. And so where you see things happen is like when we go through recessions or market bubbles happen, people who are not liquid are forced to fire sell assets to people who are. So finding that right balance where you don't stay overly liquid and earn 0% on a great portion of your portfolio, but creating that cash flow is really, really important. And psychologically, like waking up and knowing that your cash flow, this cash flow number right here, is enough to supply for your, and I use three numbers. There's the security number that says that you don't go broke and you can live life comfortably. Then there's the ideal life number, and not the Lamborghini number. This is like you can travel, you can spend time with your friends, you can live life on your terms. That's the comfort number. And then there's kind of your impact number. That's the, out there where you say, hey, like now I'm looking at what can I do to really impact the people around me and all those things. I think we kind of have to check each of those boxes off in that order. But when you know that like your security number to your lifestyle number, when you're somewhere in between that space, your mind just kind of gives you, it's like, okay, you can relax a little bit. You can start focusing on the next step, that next level. But I think when people try to go from insecure to impact, we miss that gap of what needs to happen.
Yeah, coming from a construction and real estate background myself, it's foundation, frame, then roof.
Yeah.
And then that creates the envelope.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. That's exactly right. That's a good one. I'm actually going to steal that one if that's okay.
Take it. Put your name on it. It's cool, man.
Oh man. But yeah, but no, and that's the thing is like from building the wealth standpoint, if we have liquidity first and then we have cash flow and we make sure those two things widen, what will happen is your cash flow can then be reinvested back into liquidity till you have enough extra liquidity out here to add to this pyramid. And over time, you'll start to see it take shape where eventually we have enough cash flow where it replaces our income. And we can then choose, you can take this cash flow and you can spiral it up to speculation. This is things, the definition of speculative investments are things that you buy today and hope to sell for more tomorrow. So, currencies, gold and silver, angel investments, land, all those things that don't have a cash flow component are by nature, speculative things. And some of them have got different risk profiles and all sorts of decisions to make on that. But in my mind, what makes this simple is you deal with your needs first. And your need is to say, no matter what, if I have everything go away tomorrow, my risk mitigated portfolio of real estate, dividend paying stocks, and debt is going to pay for my life. And I can be comfortable knowing that makes sure I'm never going to be poor. That is psychologically, I think, such a huge, huge thing. And it's the sustainability. Because if you say I live on $150,000 a year and I have $160,000 of after-tax income coming in, you're like, this is sustainable. I can be comfortable with this. This is good. And with things like real estate, that's going to have not only the cash flow component that lives today, but it's also ticking the box of you want to have appreciation. So you'll have appreciation, principal pay down. It's tax efficient. Those things, like that wealth building process of building liquidity, cash flow, speculation, if we follow that, it is a dependable structure that we can work on over and over again.
Yeah, it's and I like how there's layers too, because if one starts to crumble, it's caught by others. If you're too exposed with speculation, you have cash flow to protect you. Even if it goes down 50%, you're still good because you have liquidity to carry you over until you can rebuild that structure.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about the safety nets. And I'll even go one step further, is if you think about it in terms of gambling. So it's like if you're going to roll the die, and all of these are die roll, your liquidity is, it says, well, if you roll 1 through 6, you still have the same amount of money you had. So it's irrelevant. The cash flow is like, well, if you roll a 1 through 5, you're probably going to win off of this. So it's a very low risk proposition because it's going to continue to cash flow. And even then it's like, well, as long as you can keep rolling, you're going to keep having cash flow. So even if we lose value in our property, as long as we can hold it for 10 years, positive bias of the market will probably bring it back around. The speculation is more of like you roll 1 and 6, you roll a 1, you're going to win. Well, that's a 16% chance. If you can roll the die 10 times, odds are you're going to win one of them. So that works out fine. So as long as the return is great enough, that's good. The problem is the road is littered with people who wanted to speculate first, put all their eggs in one basket. It didn't work. The only people you hear about who speculated and did well are the ones who did well. They can afford a blog. There's plenty of people who can't afford a blog who had bad stories. But if you do this in this order, if your cash flow comes in and you don't need it to live on, you can speculate with it. It can go right up here. If you lose all of that, guess what happens next year? You have a new pile of money to go try this game again with. So instead of you using up all your dry powder on the spins, you're creating new dry powder each year. And that new dry powder gives you the ability to continue to play this game. And that's ding, 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 that's sustainable.
Yeah. And inside creating dry powder, there's tactics to multiply the dry powder, like grants and tax credits. And like, it's one of the things. So my mom, when I was growing up, my mom did taxes, and then she eventually became an enrolled agent. So I totally nerded out with her about this stuff.
That's awesome.
And one of the things is that that a lot of people will argue against, but I've seemed to see this firsthand with how I've run my businesses. We had 7-figure businesses, and the tax code is in everyone's favor. It's not against anyone. It's a book, a big fat book of too many pages of incentivized actions. So once you understand what it is they want you to do, that's how you win. It's like, I wouldn't play any game without reading the rule book.
And that's what I like the way you said that, because you said the tax code is incentivized in people's favor. It took me a second to comprehend that, because I don't know that taxes are incentivized in people's favor.
No,
but the tax code is 100%, because taxes are simple. You make X, you pay Y. However, the tax code is all the things the government thinks they want you to do, which is why it's really, I love this study, is seeing, like, you can tell the priorities of an administration based on where their tax codes lie. And so you can kind of see, like, hey, are we more themed around green energy, things, or are we more themed around reinvestment back into the economy or real estate or all these? It's very interesting to understand the priorities of administrations based on the way that they adjust and change tax codes. Yeah. And so I completely agree with that. We really had a big shift in 2017 in the way that tax incentives were structured, because it went from being more of like a production tax to a consumption tax, where if you reinvest, there were so many ways, so many angles to take to reduce your tax burden. That's a whole different talk, but that's something that's also really way different. Yeah. Well, it all links together in the whole sustainability mindset. Yep. And so, and I'll come back to the pyramid in a second, maybe talk about like what flows in each thing. I think that might be helpful. I wanted to talk structure, kind of give that context, but then I'll give some content specifically. But like, just the sustainability piece is, when you look at building wealth, one way people take is saying, I want to get that extra return. So if I'm saving $100,000 a year, 10,000, or whatever your number is, 5,000 a year, 2,000 a year, I'm saving this money and I want to earn the best return I can. So instead of me earning a 6% return, I'm going to earn an 8% return, because that's a 33% better return. How exciting is that? Well, it's still, that's 2% greater on, say it's $100,000, is $2,000 of extra cash that brings in. That same person is probably expending in some waste, whether it's due to taxes or debt service or other areas, losses that are taking place that are unnecessary, is probably expending, that same, if they're saving 100, they're probably expending maybe $50,000 of waste. So if we can find 10% waste to reduce, then it means you're actually reducing your outflow $10,000. Yeah. Which is way more impactful than focusing on trying to increase a little bit on the savings over here. Not that you can't and shouldn't do both. It's just, when we have all of our wealth stored in a bucket and there's leaks in the bucket, one way to fix it is to dump more water in the top faster. The other way is to just plug the leaks. And plugging the leaks, a lot of times, one of our biggest leaks is taxes. It's taxes, debt service, and market losses. If we can reduce those things and cut that out, it's like, well, shoot, all of a sudden this game becomes a lot easier. It's much more sustainable. We're not having to play twice as hard to keep level. We reduce the leaks. And then even if we have a trickle of new income, we're going to be able to build that bucket up a lot faster. Yeah. It's I think the biggest impact is not how you use the money, but how you manage it. Yeah. Right. Because you can out lose your wins real fast. Oh, I've done 100%. I've done it 100% thinking I was, I'm making all these good decisions and I wasn't managing it. And it was because I wasn't managing, nearly bled to death with financially, obviously. Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so tough, because I know we're all geared, and that's how we keep score as entrepreneurs. Yeah. And so when you see that something's not sustainable, your goal is to how quickly can I fix it and how quickly can I get back to where I was? Yeah. And so, or where I felt like I should have been. And a lot of that is all up here with how we look at it all in our own head of what we feel like we should have been at. But and that's why I'm so passionate about getting this message out, is because this is a easy way to where if you will follow the wealth pyramid, you will be able to have dependable, predictable cash flow. It protects you in so many different situations, and it gives you the ability to do what you want to do, which is take advantage of opportunity. Because if we follow this along the way, when we can go buy significant cash flow at a value, like right now is a perfect example. We can't buy cash flow at a great value right now. Very few areas can we buy cash flow at even a decent value. And so because we just have a lot of capital floating around, because somebody, not going to say who, likes to print money. And so we're printing a lot of money right now, and a lot of stuff's floating around. So everybody's kind of flush. See how long it lasts, but that's the case there. That's again, another longer term discussion. But when that happens, it's harder to buy cash flow. And so maybe we focus a little bit more on liquidity, and we try to make sure we keep our liquidity earning as much as possible, so that when there is a pullback, you can go buy cash flow at a discount, buy lots of it, and go from there.
Yeah. And I think there's a potential with that situation that you're just talking about for people to make the wrong step and jump into speculation, because if the value of their dollars are going down, they're going to try and find something that's countering it and moving it into a different direction to kind of win back plus inflation.
It is. And you're playing that catch up game. And it's something that when you're investing out of pure fear, I'm not as comfortable with that. And I think that here's my mindset. If your fear is inflation, if you go through this, the problem is what you have to do is be able to identify what's motivating your decisions. And that's something where this leaves being a financial planning discussion and much more into a psychology discussion, which I personally absolutely love because I think it's just so cool to understand why we do what we do. I already know how to make money. Now it's like, well, how do we make money and also make sure that our quality of life is on point? And so that's where you need the clarity piece and understanding why you do what you do is all key there. But like, take the inflationary concern. If that's the concern, is saying, okay, I'm out here, I just made $3 million from selling my business, or I just made $30,000 or whatever my number is. I have this cash and I'm worried that in a year, it's going to be worth half as much if I don't do something today. First off, probably an unrealistic fear, but even if it is, what if you followed the model I'm talking about here of the wealth pyramid, and you said, I need to live on $120,000 a year. $10,000 a month means that I am comfortable. So what we are going to do, and $120,000 of today's money, not tomorrow's money. So we get that piece. So you go out here and you say, well, I have $3 million. I need to live on 120. I am going to take $1 million of that and go buy real estate and create $80,000 of cash flow. I'm going to take $500,000 of that and go buy debt. I'm going to create $40,000 of cash flow. I now have my 120 from diversified sources, and I have an extra, 1.5 of liquidity to do it as I please. I can take 5 of that and put it up here in speculation. So I have 1, I have 2, and then I have 5 at the very top. Is that right? I'm not sure if I did that math right. Bear with me.
I think so. Yeah.
So that being said, so now you've got your speculation up here, and that could be, let's just say that the speculation point is we decided to put it into a mixture of land, gold and silver, and crypto. And we'll say angel investments. And so you put, those are your speculative things. You put your cash flow into real estate and debt, and you put your liquidity, you put that into mutual funds, savings account, cash value life insurance, all things that are highly, highly liquid. That's kind of your levels that you have there. Well, if we go through a period of a massive inflation, your speculation will do whatever it does at that point in time, because it's tied to some hard assets. And who knows what will happen with like the more speculative things like a crypto market or whatnot there. But even your basic of just your cash flow that's being created, if all you did was just create the cash flow, your real estate is something that is well hedged against inflation itself, because we borrowed it with today's dollars and we leveraged it heavily. So that debt is a hedge against inflation. We have land and actual physical commodities that, as things go up in price, should increase and appreciate in value as well. And that entire time we have cash flow that should also increase based on a depreciation of the dollar. So as it devalues, we should be able to increase the cash flow because rents should go up across the board. That's just the way that money works. So you actually, by doing these things, you do protect yourself from that concern. Now, the flip side of that concern is that, well, what if I deploy all my money today? I just made money because the market was doing well. If I deploy it all tomorrow in another part of the economy, but it's still at the same timeline of the economic cycle, well, am I just selling high and buying high? Wouldn't it be better if I bought some low? And that's why it's nice to mix that up. Whereas we expand wider, we put money into liquidity so that we can dollar cost average into the market cycle. It's as you start going through the challenges that happen in building wealth, this is the framework within which you can expand so much. But this framework, you will see this happen in every business. Every business needs to have liquidity, cash flow, and then its big wins along the way. Every trust needs to have that same thing. Every individual needs to have it. And if you build that framework, it's just so stable. It's psychologically so healthy for entrepreneurs. And it's one thing that I've seen just make such a huge difference, even though a lot of times balance sheets are more set up that way. But thinking about like all the different fears that we have and saying, well, how am I protected? If I follow this model, does it protect me? And when the answer is, well, 95% of the things you're concerned about are protected in this model, it's just like, oh, I can quit devoting all my mental margin to that and focus my mental margin on creating more of what got me here in the first place.
Yeah, it's so true. So quarterly, well, every 12 weeks ish. So it's not quite quarterly, but I do a new budget and stuff like that. And I notice emotionally, right? I have, when I first do it, I have super high confidence. And the longer I wait to do it again, it starts getting a little mucky, right? Because I have
it gets fuzzy.
New things bought in, new things and new accounts. And then it gets to a point where you just can't grasp it anymore because all of your energy is focused on what I'm trying to build. You know, we lean forward as entrepreneurs and we just leave this stuff behind. So it's something that we have to take personal responsibility to manage.
Yep.
And even just writing a house budget.
Yeah. And I think that's something that at all levels. So kind of the hierarchy of hierarchy, I keep using that word because you got it stuck in my head, but kind of like the person, the level, I guess, that people work through is at first, like your first thing is getting your house budget set up. And then, after that, maybe your job is with your business to work with like a fractional CFO or something to kind of help with some of that coordination. Because I do believe there's a lot of strength in having additional viewpoints and coordination brought to you. Because at the end of the day, here is something you can take to the bank. The only person you can 100% guarantee has your best interest at heart is you. And so you have to realize that piece of it, but you can get good people to help advise you along the way. And that phrase actually sticks in my craw a little bit. I can tell by your facial reaction, like, wait a sec, is that right? And it is true. It's the only person can 100% guarantee. I believe I have pure intentions. I believe you have pure intentions. I believe lots of people have good, pure intentions. But at the end of the day, it is also psychologically healthy for you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. But you also know it's not sustainable because once you actually build real wealth, it's not sustainable for you to have your finger in every pie, for you to try to be coordinated between your tax professionals and your legal professionals and your operational teams and your business and all those things. That just puts you in the middle and it puts you away from putting your foot on the gas. And it's such a waste because like that, I see so many entrepreneurs get crushed by trying to manage everything because they are a solopreneur for managing their wealth. And they really need to bring in team and create team to support that. But early on, like when you're building your wealth, make sure you do your house budget, making sure you know what money comes in, where it's going, and have a plan for how you're paying yourself and paying for your future. Looking for efficiency, looking for where are we wasting money? Like where are we paying things out that we would like to not pay out? Doesn't mean you can always fix it. Like if you're paying $10,000 of tax and you're a W-2 employee, go start a business, create some losses. Take the risk of that because at the very worst thing, you're playing with house money for part of that risk that's being put in play. And so
speaking my language right there. Yeah.
It's just not difficult, but that's like piece one is look for where we can eliminate it. Then piece two is maybe look for what team you can put in play. With my clients, like once we get to a certain level, like my program that I offer for high net worth clients, which is usually like 5 million of net worth and up, is to do what's called the Wealth CEO program. And this is something that you don't necessarily, there's plenty of people who do, I think, similar thing. Not really, actually. This is a gap in the marketplace. So the gap that I see is that there are not, like, this is what started this. This is how this baby was birthed. We have plenty of time. I'll go through this quickly.
Oh yeah. Let's rock.
Same thing I said at the beginning of the podcast. Conversations would happen. No action wouldn't be taken because not that they didn't understand it. It was just didn't have the capacity to get all of the team players in line. And so I finally said, hey, what if you just paid X amount of dollars a month for my advice? I will give it to you. And then if you like it, I'll help you implement it. And if you ever get tired of this, it's month to month. So walk away and do whatever else you want. But I don't want to feel like I'm selling you things. And I don't want to have my income tied to what you do and don't buy. And I don't want to give you advice and then have you figure out how to implement it and waste your time potentially doing it wrong? And
Yeah.
then we have to go back and fix it. And so I said, what if we just did it right from day one? Everybody's life was better. We made more impact and we all got to enjoy our life more and have more fun. And I had that kind of aha moment. And I put that in front of a few clients and they said, Sam, this is exactly what I want. I am so frustrated trying to get this person to talk to this person and this person to talk to this person. And the calls with you are great. But then I try to take that back and repeat it to this person and communicate to this. And by the time we're done playing this morbid game of password with my professionals and my money, it's so distorted that nothing ever happens. So I'm like, well, that's not what I want because it's not the original vision that was there. And so now I just said, well, how about this? If this is all your people around you in this big circle and all your professionals are digging into you, you're going to step off to the side. You're going to put in a CEO for your money, just like you hire a CEO for your business. You control the business. You control the money. That's still your job. But you get to have someone with a Rolodex, with experience to come in and take some of that load off of you on a fractional basis. And then you can run off that. And that is for me, man, honestly, and this is not what the podcast is about, but that is for me has freed up so much of my mental margin because instead of me feeling like I had to do like, it's all about making sure you feel like you've delivered enough value to your people. Because that's something I always struggle with in a personal relationship is I want to give so much value, but without the right containers, you're always chasing, is it enough value? Is this person happy? Is this person unhappy? Setting a good container around it, like boundaries actually are so key, whether it's in your money management, whether it's in your relationships, whether it's in you talked about on the podcast, so I can say it, whether it's in your sex life, like, like what boundaries lets you do is they let you explore things to the fullest, or it lets you interact to the fullest. I not explore, interact to the fullest, because without a boundary, you're always in that timid mode of should the person or the client be contacting Sam? Should I be contacting the client? Vice versa. But when you set those boundaries in place, you're really able to say, hey, I know what I should be asking for. And so it creates such a healthy interaction when it's done right. And that's something I think as entrepreneurs, we are used to in early stages of our career, setting porous boundaries, because you say yes to everything because you're never sure where opportunity lies. As you get a little bit more disciplined, I see you nodding your head because you're like, yeah. As you get a little more disciplined, you start like getting those boundaries a little more rigid. It's not that you want to say no to things, it's that you realize for you to make the impact in the world, you have to learn how to put containers around the right things. So,
I mean, I look at boundaries as an agreement, like just a simple agreement. Like that's where I'm drawing a line. I'll dance with it. I'll keep on having these conversations with this boundary to see if I have to move it up or pull it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, you have to have a high level relationship with it. But that's what it is. Like, and just so you just don't spin out of control, you know. And back to what you were saying before with the growing into these boundaries and keeping them as you grow. It's a lot of people are very fast and loose when they're starting businesses, and that's okay. Like I didn't understand boundaries until I was probably 30. Like, you know what I mean?
Like until
everything
today
was
years old.
Until today years old. Exactly. Yeah. I just white knuckled through everything until I finally got the understanding of like, okay, so if I'm going to work with a lawyer, I need to learn the lawyer language. You know, I need to not use something I'm trying to think of a good example, like exposure in dollars versus legal. Yeah. So that means how much money's available. And so it just totally different terming that you don't want to mix.
Absolutely. Well, and it's always like, as you level up, you have to learn new things. And then you have to also find that team to make that happen. So no, man, I couldn't agree more. So, let's do this let me give a couple more thoughts. And then maybe if you have any questions you want to go through here, we're happy to do it. But basically in that whole building the wealth pyramid, the order of what I would look at doing there, and like, here's what I personally use for this, and this is just across the board, is at the base for my liquidity. I store that in cash. I store it in very, very few like liquid-ish stocks that I'm comfortable with their risk profile. They're like MLPs that are tax efficient. And then lastly is mostly cash value life insurance. And that's a long conversation because I did that for I still have the ability to do it for decades. And there's so many ways to do it wrong, but when it's done right, and I actually have a video I did with somebody else that I think you know, and real basic video of saying you when you build a life insurance policy, you should have 80% of it liquid in year one at minimum. You should be able to break even by no later than year 5. And you should have, by the end of 20 years, you should have a long-term expense ratio of less than 20%. That's the data. And if someone is listening to this podcast and is trying to figure out if they're getting screwed or not, use that. Checkpoint 1, 80% liquid year 1. Checkpoint 2, break even by year 5, which means you have more money in it than you put into it. Checkpoint 3 is make sure you have no more than a 20% expense ratio over 20 years. That's at least a starting
year
point.
1, year 5, and year 20.
Year 1, year 5, and year 20. And that's any life insurance policy has an illustration you can look at to see those numbers.
Of course.
There's some flexibility to that a little bit either direction, but like if you're 20% off of those benchmark numbers, then you're doing it wrong. And so, or if you're buying, and here's another thing, if you're buying life insurance and it's keeping you from buying cash flow and other investments, you're also doing it wrong. Life insurance is meant to be a way to manage liquidity. Don't worry about managing liquidity if you don't have any liquidity to manage or don't have any other assets above that. So it's kind of like, it's like the hierarchy of when we look at it, is this is for assuming you have some wealth to manage. Yeah. That's where that fits in. Is it's the purpose of it is I hate to have liquidity earn 0%. And the benefit of having something like a life insurance policy that's highly liquid, it's creditor protected, and we can leverage it down the road, which lets us potentially earn 2 returns on $1. That makes a lot of sense as a good place to store liquidity. Go ahead.
So that's one of my favorite tools is infinite banking or whatever you want to call it. To where you own it, but the IRS doesn't think you do because it's a loss, but you can borrow against it.
Yeah.
And you're your own bank.
And when it's done right, it's really, really attractive. The issue a lot of people have with it, and where I think we miss one of the ways we could grow wealth, is it's very simple what success in this infinite banking world looks like. Because infinite banking means that you can put money into it, you can borrow money out of it, and the amount that it costs you to own the policy plus the amount it costs you to borrow is less than what you earn. That's success, and that's infinite, and that's sustainable, which is something, again, our brains want to go ding, ding, ding. And if it's not sustainable, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So a lot of people get into those and look at them like, well, what am I doing? This is going to cannibalize itself because my cost of the policy is this. My borrowing cost is based on market rates. I can't affect that much. There's no way my policy is going to earn more than that. And so then you either have to borrow less from it or decide you really want a death benefit. So you're okay paying more for this, which is usually where people end up kind of getting. And so in that question of like, does it fit or doesn't it fit? Look at your cost of the policy plus your cost of borrowing and see if that's likely to exceed the gross earnings of the policy over time. If that is the case, then you have infinite banking. If it's not, then you need to do a double check and maybe a swipe left on your advisor.
Hey, quick question. Something just popped up in my head. Like, so say someone is in that position because they might be listening right now and they're like, ooh, things aren't matching up. Is there a way to reset?
If you're already in it, there's always a way to reset. There's always a way to reset it. So once you're in it, it's not always painless, but you can always reset along the way. And then if you're still in the evaluation phase, you can use this kind of information to negotiate with your advisor, because the change that's made there is typically a advisor related change where they reduce some of the fees that are in it. And that is not always a conversation advisors love to have, because normally those fees are directly correlated to their compensation. but so be it in life. Like my job is to make sure that you can invest long term. That's where my mindset is very different. Is I could care less about selling an insurance policy, because that's like step one in the 10-piece puzzle that I see for the clients I work with. That's like, okay, well, this is just a way to manage liquidity. You get that done and fixed where we're not going backwards because of it. And then the quicker we can get into cash flow comes in and flows back in. So I don't want to if I get into a lot of that, I'll talk on that for hours, because I hate watching my entrepreneurial friends get screwed over in that industry, because it's one of the ones that I think is really lacking transparency. And so I've done my best to, once I really didn't care if I ever sold another insurance policy again in my life, I just ripped the curtain back and said, hey, here's how you do this. And I have made a lot of friends on the entrepreneurial side and a lot of enemies on the agent side. Yeah. But if we ever need to discuss more of this, if somebody is ever questioning this and is like, hey, I think I might be going down the wrong path, I will literally jump on a phone call with anybody for 30 minutes to explain how this works and makes some agent's life, difficult because they're trying to screw over an entrepreneur. So if you can prove to me you're an entrepreneur who's about to get screwed, I will go into rescue mode and I will mother hen you until you don't get screwed. So that's that.
So maybe what we can do is turn this into another episode, because it's
that'd be so much better.
That'd be like
so
a transparency,
good thinking.
a transparency episode. And the reason it's so important that I really want this to happen is because when I was younger, like I was 25 and all I was doing was just gobbling up information, right? Yeah. And then I came out of it sounding like a conspiracy theory. I'm like, Mom, Dad, you got to look at your fees, make sure that they're not making more money than you. And like go to my friends. And like, I was so like, my mind was so blown. It made such a mess. And everyone was just like, all right, whatever, man. And like a lot of people don't understand what's actually happening. All like the breakdown of fees and stuff like that. And it's
not like
everybody's got to make money.
Everybody can make money. Everybody can win. It's just got to be proportionate. And here's what it is. And I'm going to use this word till I'm blue in the face. It has got to be sustainable. And so if the fees make this significantly less likely to succeed, we have to adjust. And the problem is you've got to understand what you're doing, what those numbers are. But it's not difficult. And it's something that when you get everybody's interest aligned, it's really easy and it's really fun. And so that's another benchmark I probably haven't mentioned enough. If managing your wealth isn't fun, we're probably doing it wrong. We need to figure this out, because it should be fun. Like we're getting to be in a very blessed environment. We live in an awesome country to live in across the board. I mean, I know there's challenges in any place you live, but like we live in an excellent place and an excellent time to be alive. And we have resources and we understand things that we haven't understood in the past. Like the fact that we can jump on a podcast and sit here and talk about our hierarchy of needs. Yeah. I mean, realize that like not too many years back, the hierarchy of needs were survival. And like we were dealing with like real issues. Like now, like we're sitting here, we're saying, okay, like, hey, how can we really make our impact? And that's such a cool conversation to have. It's a very privileged conversation to have. And I fully recognize that. And that's where the whole to whom much has been given and as much as required mindset comes from, is because I really do feel like that's a responsibility, because we're living in an awesome time to be alive. And what's more awesome than to get to not only share that time with you or to have that time for yourself, but to also be able to share that mindset and bring others up around you. I think that's the impact I think most people want. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I ran yesterday for exercise, not because I was being chased by a tiger. I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm pretty aware that whenever I start sweating and want to quit, I'm just like, well, there's not a tiger. So I don't really need to quit yet. But that's actually one of the motivators I have in my head. I start thinking about all the, people got caught before me. Awesome. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. And it's, excuse me, we have, I think that the first step, right? So there's an intimidation when it comes to money, because it's really not taught anywhere. And when I was in high school, they taught you how to bake, but no one taught you how to balance a checkbook. Like, so it's really weird that there's no like first kiss to finances. There's no like getting over that hump to really understand just a little bit, so you can understand a little bit more and further your relationship with your wealth. It's the thing that's actually the engine that is the economy. And if you're going to be a willing participant in the economy and have a great life because of capitalism, it's a two-way street. You have to be educated and you have to be understanding on how the tool works. So you can, for no one else, everybody around you, right? If you want to take a selfish approach, cool. But also you're impacting everyone else, So I think education on these things, obviously, because I have the entrepreneurial hierarchy of needs, I think it's a social responsibility to at least know where you stand.
Yep.
Whether you do something about it, it's on you. Yeah.
Yep. I love that. That's a good thing to point that as a responsibility. I think that's a good frame in that for sure. So and it's tough. That first step is tough, but I think a lot of times what I've seen happen is clarity comes from understanding the end vision of where you want to go. So it comes from understanding where you're at today and where you want to be, and then building a rough roadmap of that. And it's actually not that terribly. In my mind, it's something that happens just like in an instant. That's just how my brain works. It's always, hey, where are you at? Where do you want to be? How do we get there efficiently as possible? And I use my library of resources to make that happen. But even if you have none of that, you just can take the time to sit down and say, hey, where do I want to be? What does my life look like when I do this? And you say, where am I at right now? Like financially, like where am I actually sitting? Like be real with yourself. What debts do I have? What do I have here? What's in play? And look at that and say, well, how do I get from here to here? Like, what is my number? What is the number that I say if I had this amount of money coming in free cash flow, what I would not feel like I needed to do anything. And for some people in the Midwest, that number is $45,000. For some people in California, that number is 120. For some people in other places, that number is 250. I don't care what the number is. It's all relative.
It's irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't
So
matter.
pick that number out. It doesn't. It's pick that number out and know what it is, and you look at how you make that happen. And then you can use the tool of the wealth pyramid to get to that number very easily. And once you're there, like once you've built those two base levels, after that, everything else just flows and gels so easily. And so if I can leave with any advice, that's where I leave it, just saying you can build that out very easily. You can figure out where you're at, figure out where you want to go, use that as kind of your in between to help provide structure to your roadmap of what you do. And then, there's the tools I've already listed in the podcast here, what you use to build that pyramid out.
Yep.
Cash value life insurance and savings accounts for liquidity, real estate and debt for cash flow, and then speculation is whatever you do after that. But those two levels you can build out in a very, very safe, predictable environment over and over again, and then go from there.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily take a lot of money.
It doesn't. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, think about and this is where it gets crazy, is think about from like a real estate standpoint, if your goal is $100,000, if we can do 8% cash flow on real estate, or 6 to 8% cash flow, which is not unreasonable to have, especially with leverage and debt prices where they're at right now. If we're at 8% cash flow, divide 100,000 by 8, and you realize like it's 1.25 is what it takes to get to $100,000 a year of very tax efficient cash flow, and have $1.25 million of equity in real estate that's going to appreciate like that. That represents $4 million of real value. And so when we have inflation or appreciation that happens, or whatever else takes place, 3, 4, 5 years later, you will have all the appreciation plus the principal pay down because your tenants are paying down your rent.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the nice tax efficiencies that come with real estate, some of which are really, really incredible right now. That's a whole different podcast of how I took a client.
Depreciation alone is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I had a client. I just
on a commercial
this
property.
morning.
Get at it. Yeah.
Well, and with the new rules from 2017, which will probably sunset here in a year or two, but like I had a client who offset a $2 million sale of business almost entirely with going over and buying real estate, and we had to buy $1 million of real estate to offset a $2 million sale of business because of the way bonus depreciation works and the kind of assets we bought. It's mind blowing how easy the game can get when you know all the tools to play with. But step one is realizing where you're at, where you want to be.
So he didn't have to pay $2 million. He had to pay 200,000, I'm guessing.
So he sold $2 million. He was going to pay $400,000 in tax. We took $1 million of that and bought different assets and things and some tax credits and whatnot. And so his tax burden effectively went to like $25,000. And so of the $1 million investment, which left him with like $850,000 of equity, half of that, or almost a third to half of 40% of that was paid for off of tax savings. And so it's like, well, my risk, like year one, I just got back $300,000 of taxes that I was going to pay, and it's deferred because it's depreciation. So you recapture when you sell, but if 1031s don't go away, we can roll it in the future, or opportunity zones are still a thing. There's so many creative ways that you can reduce taxes. I'm always a fan of deferring them if we can punt that down the road in a big picture environment. Sometimes it makes sense to pay things in a current deal. Like in the last 3 or 4 years, there were some very low tax rates on capital gains. So we paid some of those.
Yep.
But there's just a lot of cool structures. Like we could talk on this for hours. I love reducing tax burdens.
Yeah. And
one of my favorite strategies involves a way where you can pay, 90% less tax on selling assets like a business or large amounts of real estate. And what it does is it creates a huge future endowment for a charity, but it gives you the ability to continue kind of utilizing it during your lifetime for you and your kids and those sort of things.
Yeah.
And then when you pass away, you can use like that whole life insurance piece. You can use that to collateralize the loan. And it just actually works really, really beautifully. It is an art form. And what it does is it lets you decide, because eventually the tax burden has to be justified. But what it lets you do is it lets you decide how it's justified. One way is to get it to the government and let them choose how to deploy the funds. This other way is you have to do good with that money yourself. I am just such a bigger believer in having control over how the funds are used. It's like, well, if
Mhm.
I can go benefit, it can't be, you can't, I mean, you could. I actually saw this happen the other day on a massive sale, but you shouldn't be self-dealing the charities you own and those kind of things. Like you can
Right.
use bigger picture things, because that's going to, if you do get audited, going to make your position rock solid, as opposed to looking like you're creating a tax, scheme.
Luke.
But that
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
said, you can affect so much positive change all by saying, I'm going to utilize my money and be a good steward of it, as opposed to having the government steward the money, which is arguably not the most efficient way to have things done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Totally
I
agree.
hope I don't offend any of your listenership with that, but the government
I
is
think they'll
not a
be.
good
I
steward
think
of
they'll
your
be all
money.
right. I think
Okay, I
we're a
appreciate
bunch of
that.
thick-skinned. So yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. 100%.
Cool.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts before we jump off?
Man, I don't have anything else. I think we covered a lot of ground here today, and
We
I
did.
just, if nothing else, I want to leave the final thought is I want to leave this as kind of like a encouragement and edification. I want to pull back something you said earlier, is the whole responsibility piece. I
Mm,
really, really believe in that, because I think that like we all have that responsibility to go back and make that positive impact on those around us, because we have a lot of privilege to even be here in the first place. That
yeah.
being said, is for those of you, for whoever's listening to this, who's at that spot, I want to encourage you in making your impact. For those of you that are not at the impact level yet and you're still trying to figure it out and get it done, I want to encourage you too, is that realize that everybody's on the journey. Like you probably look around and see people who you think are 20, 30, 40 steps ahead of you in your journey, and they're probably not as far ahead of the journey as you think. Remember, a guru is someone who's 2 steps ahead of your journey, so you can learn from everybody. And we're all on different paths. And so just be encouraged in that, and knowing that like you being here and you even having these conversations and thoughts is something that's putting you on the right path and the right route. So
Yeah.
don't let yourself get discouraged based on the comparison game. I think that's one of the biggest things we struggle with as entrepreneurs, is trying to play that comparison game where it becomes a
Yeah.
competitive and not an edifying environment. Actually, Tim, I'm gonna leave with one last quick story, if that's okay. Can I do that?
Hit it, man. We got all the time in the world. I'm yours and
I'll
yours.
take
Let's do this.
I'll take 2 minutes. So I want to tell you about one of the most incredible experiences that I've had here recently, and I haven't gotten a chance to put this into an email or content format yet, so I might as well just speak it to you. And so, one of the funds that I run is I run a fund with, actually it's with the Capitalism Group, and so we
Mm,
buy minority shares in e-commerce businesses. And so we raised capital from investors and basically said, we're going to raise capital and we'll tell you what we invest in later. And some people were gung-ho enough to say, we'll give you our capital and see if you can do good stuff with it. And so there's a lot of faith, so there's a lot of really good people. And I kind of cherry picked the investors we wanted to have in that based on who responded back. We got ones that not only were good people, but could add a lot of value. So that
sure.
was one piece. So we did that. And then we would go out, we'd find these brands from, this is from the Capitalism Group, from Ryan's group, and they had new
Mm-hmm.
brands that were coming in that were interested in receiving capital investments, but also strategic partnerships. So we kind of created like a mini Shark Tank, only we're not necessarily having to compete with 5 other sharks. That was
Sure.
nice. And so that's that. So we went through and we got some incredible brands that I'm super proud to be partnered with. And then the investors are all a very solid investment team. So we had an event in Austin where we got everybody to come together. So all of these brands showed up to do like a backroom workshop where they could go in and bring their problems, their challenges, and look for solutions. We were there to provide educational support to them. But then investors who were interested showed up. And I had a room of 15 people who showed up. And here's what was really powerful to me. In this room, there was at least one I know of who had a 9-figure exit. There was 5 or so that had 8-figure exits, which means 8 to 10 million in that, and then probably 3 or 4 that had 7-figure exits. Then there were people who run multiple people who run $1 million a year businesses. So these are all people who, by all rules, do not need to be in that room, because they're not in that room because they need to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
They were there because they wanted to encourage and edify those brands. And yeah, they're invested in their success, but it's not like their 50 or $100,000 they put in, even if we quadruple that, is going to make a huge needle mover. And definitely their advice. So they spent 2 days with us. These are all powerful people who spent 2 days. And the environment that brought to everybody of being able to give back was just such a, like, it was such a powerful, you could kind of feel the frequency of the room was operating at a high level. And so I was sitting there, and I can remember I had like one point where it was almost like an out of body experience, where I just kind of like was sitting there. I'm looking out around the room. I'm looking at this young entrepreneur who's at the front, who's kind of sharing. He's nervous to share because 20 people are looking at him and like, what am I doing? But I looked out and there's 25 people who are looking at him, who are very powerful, like well-to-do people who are locked in, engaged. No one's looking at their phone. No one's over here like annoyed they're there. Everyone's excited for where can they add value. And it was just, that environment was so cool and powerful. And the feedback I got from every single person I talked to was, this was so cool to have this opportunity to be able to invest back in those. This is one of the most satisfying things that I've done with my time and my money and my resources. And I just think that there's knowing that that's the end goal, and like seeing those things happen, like seeing how fulfilling that is. There's lots of ways we can make money together. I get it. But being able to do it in a way where like you can change the lives of the people around you, that ripple effect is like, well, okay, well, this is 20 people doing that. And that's going to lead to 6 or 7 entrepreneurs being better versions of themselves and going and impacting that. But then they're going to go have their teams and their companies and their products and their audiences are going to be influenced. And it's just, it's so mind blowing to think how doing little things right along the way can have such a huge impact. And so that's my last bit of encouragement I want to leave your audience with and leave you with. And I say it to myself every morning when I forget. It's just like the little steps along the way, and it's all part of this journey we're on. But being on that journey and being willing to try to invest and share that journey with people, that transparency is something that brings us to a whole different level as a community. And I love it.
I'm totally hitting the heart with what you just said, because it's a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid to ask. So, and I tell some people this, but some people take it a little bit too far, to have a healthy disregard for reality. Like if you don't know something already, like at least try it. But before that, ask. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I've, in starting this podcast and stuff like that, I've asked people like, what are your numbers? What can I expect? I get everything but an answer. Everything but an answer. And it's like, oh, what do you think? I'm going to make fun of you? You want to talk like, no, I just want to know. And like, you can tell like who's hit that level where like, I don't care. Like, I'm just telling you this information because we're creating a camaraderie and we're learning from each other, because the way I'm doing this podcast is totally different than other people are. And I'm going to say, hey, I messed up. I'm actually making like little videos on like what I'm doing wrong. So I can like post them and be like, don't do this and stuff like that. So just having that round table to accelerate and not be bashful, not be scared, warts and all, man. Let's, I know you're here to help me. That's, we need a lot more of that. A lot more of that.
I love that, man. That's beautifully said, Tim. Beautifully said. So
Samuel, I appreciate you to the moon and back. I really want to do a part 2 with the whole, breaking down those numbers that we talked about. Maybe we'll set that up. Up.
If there's one thing I don't have a shortage of, is the ability to talk for fun. And I would literally, Tim, I would chat with you anytime. I was disappointed the pandemic kept me out of Austin, because my game plan was to play Side Hustle with you as soon as we could. So that'll be, that is on my menu. When I'm back in town, I expect you to find me some people so we can go try it out with the real entrepreneurs.
Let's do it. A few beers and a few businesses.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Tim. Bye.
Thank you for joining us again. If you haven't already, join our online community. Link is in the show notes. It is the fastest and easiest way to live a highly intentional and satisfied life. Listen, your health, your wealth, your relationships, having fun, and the success of your business depend on it. I'll see you in there. Links in the show notes. Hope you enjoyed the episode.